Could you start a business abroad? For many of you looking to move abroad, the idea of bringing your existing job or finding one in your new country isn't ideal. Throughout history, people immigrating to new countries have found entrepreneurship a viable option. So that's what we're talking about today. I will be interviewing a recent immigrant and entrepreneur here in Mexico City, Corinne of Skin by Corinne. But before we jump into that, let me introduce myself. I'm Adelia Abor-Shade. This is my channel, Picky Girl Travels the World. This is where I demystify travel, money, and everything in between to support women like you as they pursue living life on their terms, not society's. That's exactly what I did 8 years ago when I ditched the people in places that were no longer serving me and moved abroad, a lifelong dream of mine. And on this channel, I share all about that. So if living abroad, living life on your own terms, if any of that resonates with you, be sure to subscribe. And let's get on with the interview. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview.
Yeah.
You have you moved to Mexico when?
Last March, so March 2023. It's been a little over a year now.
Okay, all right. And why on earth did you move to Mexico? And I ask that as somebody who has lived in Mexico for a hot minute, but that's the question I always get asked. Like, why Mexico of all places?
Yeah. So I always tell people that Mexico wasn't first on my list. It wasn't even a consideration. So when I started, once I knew I was ready to leave the United States, I think this was like before the pandemic. So maybe like 2019. I had a couple countries on my list that I wanted to explore, and Mexico was not on that list, admittedly. But as I started doing research and trying to figure out like how I would make this move happen for me, I was finding it really difficult to find information. So, it was really hard to come across really good, helpful information online for some of the countries that I was considering. And two, I was looking for community. I couldn't find a strong community of Black expats that I felt like would be a good landing place for me. And so through my research, specifically through YouTube, I started to come across these lovely group of women who were based in Mexico and seemed to be having really great success living in Mexico, specifically Mexico City. And so I thought to myself, hey, that wasn't on my list, but let me consider it. At this time, we're full swing into the pandemic. Mexico was one of the few countries that was still open. And I was like, let me just go. Let me just check it out and see and work from Mexico City for a couple of months. And that's what I did and fell in love. So I immediately saw the appeal that other folks were seeing in terms of, what makes it a great city in terms of its walkability, the nature, the culture, the food, and just fell in love with it. I ended up staying a lot longer than I had planned to, bounced around to different neighborhoods, even tried going to different states, different cities. And I was like, no, Mexico City, this is pretty much it. So I was like, okay, that's where I'm going. Had a couple more trips in between, sprinkled in between then, but I was like, yeah, Mexico City is a great place. I really like it, and so that's where I'll go. So that's how I ended up here. not originally in the plan, but I was willing to pivot because I liked it so much.
I understand that feeling because I ended up here sort of accidentally, and the minute I got here, I was like, oh, this is it. This is the place for me.
Yes.
Now, when you were first considering leaving the US, what were you thinking? I am going to leave my current career and possibly transition into being an entrepreneur.
Mm. Yes and no. So at the time I was in human resources for about 10 years. At that time, I was working at a corporate job. And I thought that there was a possibility that I could take it with me, but I also knew that I needed to plan in case I wasn't able to. So, and that actually turned out being the case. So when I first moved here, I was able to work remotely for about 6 months in that corporate position. And then they were like, okay, so when are you coming back? And I was like, I'm not. So once, I had that conversation with my corporate employer. They were like, okay, well, we'll give you some time to transition, for them to transition and find my replacement. But, we basically can't need you to be here in the US, and we need you here in the office. And so I was able to kind of plan around that because I'm also a licensed esthetician. So while I was working in corporate America, I was also working in a spa on nights and weekends. And they're just kind of building up clientele, building up my skills. And of course, I couldn't take that job with me because it was very much, you need to be there in the spa hands-on. So in some ways, I was able to kind of plan for both, even though I wasn't 100% certain what work would look like for me once I left the United States.
Okay. Now, as an aside, because we're going to come back to this, but you worked in HR.
Yes.
You were working outside the country, and that just made me think of all these people I see talking about, like, my job won't let me work. Do y'all know any way I could work without them finding out that I'm outside the country? Now, I would imagine you're like on the other side of that. So is it as simple as, because this is the piece of advice I see people giving all the time, get you a VPN and they'll never know where you are?
No, no, we know, but like the culture of the company that I was at didn't really, didn't police people in that way. What we were doing as I was starting to leave, we were starting to look at compensation, right? So we were starting to factor in, okay, depending on where you are geo-wise, do we need to make adjustments to your salary because either the cost of living and labor is different? Because I was based in San Francisco, California. So of course the company is like, if we don't have to pay as much, we're going to do that.
You need to be here.
And so they were definitely looking at like geolocation. Do we need to make modifications to people's salary based on where they're living? So there was ways that the company was starting to kind of quote unquote crack down on, people working remotely. We did have a hybrid workforce. So there were some people who were required to be in office, some people who were allowed to work fully remote. And then we were supposed to be in the office about 2 to 3 days a week. But we always knew, we just didn't, there was no need for us to go look, because you decide whether or not you want to take a 10% hit to your salary because you want to be based in Dallas, Texas. So that we kind of like left it up to the employees to make that decision for themselves.
Okay. All right. Now you confirmed what I suspected.
Yes.
If y'all are out here, if y'all are out here thinking y'all are going to pull the wool over somebody's eyes by working in another country, the only person you are fooling is yourself.
Yeah. Mostly because of taxes and liability, right? So we have to know that. We have to know how much we're supposed to tax you. I say we, like I'm still in corporate. They have to know.
Okay. So I think I did realize that you were working your day job, plus you were becoming an esthetician. Now, that was all happening sort of prior to you considering, I think I'm going to leave the US. Was the plan, or was there a plan? Was it like, I'll do my day job in the day, I'll do this on the side? Or was there a part of you that was probably already looking to transition out of your day job?
Oh, these are good questions, by the way. I'll be honest. I was thinking about this morning. I was like, if they were to let me be remote, I probably would still be at that corporate job. I'm not gonna lie, just because of like the benefits, right? The good pay.
Hey, a regular paycheck.
Right.
That people don't talk about that when you work for yourself. I miss that.
Exactly. So it wasn't a part of the plan in terms of I was going to come to Mexico and fully walk away from human resources. I thought it would still be a part of my work life. But I did know that at some point I was going to have to let it go. I just didn't know when. I definitely wasn't expecting to be the first year that I was here in Mexico, Mexico City. I was giving myself like a runway of like a year or two. But it happened within like the first 6 to 9 months that I was here. So yes, but not as quickly as I thought.
So even had you stayed in the US, Do you think you'd have kept doing both things?
Yeah, I would have.
Okay.
So it was a really great setup for me because my corporate office, my home, and the spa that I worked at were all within a mile of each other. So I was literally able to just like walk to these three locations.
Oh,
So it was really
you
easy
can't
for me
beat that.
to, yeah, it was really easy for me to maintain both this, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, and then, this part-time gig that I had at the local spa that I worked at. So I could say yes. And the money was good. So, so yeah.
You can't beat that.
Hmm.
Okay, so you moved, you fell in love with Mexico City, you moved, you worked remotely, and you had this other skill set.
Hmm.
Um, because one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you is because I've talked to other people who have owned businesses or run businesses here in Mexico. But you're only the second person I've talked to that is running a brick and mortar business, which is a
Hmm.
little different than running a business online from another country. And so you just said, initially you thought you'd give yourself a runway of a year or two, maybe. And
Hmm.
that runway was shortened. Okay. Well, you tell me, the thought of opening a business in another country where you are not fluent in the language, what was your thought process? Um, how were you feeling even just contemplating that?
Girl, you don't know what the hell you're doing. Like, you have no clue. So I started taking clients here in my apartment building. I would say a couple of months before I knew that I was going to have to walk away from my corporate job. And it was mostly because I was bored. I was like, I'm so tired. I was starting to experience a little bit of burnout with HR, and being remote was not making it any better for me. And so I was like, I need something else to do. So I started taking clients here in my building, and of course, immediately saw a lot of interest and demand for it. Um, and then at that same time, I had a conversation with my boss. I was like, yeah, I'm not going to be able to come back. And as a matter of fact, I resigned, and they were like, no, please don't, not yet. Can you give us, can you give us a little bit more time? So we came to an agreement where I actually ended up staying on for like an additional 3 months or so. And with that knowledge in the back of my mind, and with my runway being shortened, I was like, okay, I need to figure something else out. Even though coming to Mexico City, I had given myself a lot of cushion, a lot of safety net with savings and money. I was like, well, what's the long-term plan? That money, that savings is going to run out eventually. And of course, it just made sense. I was like, I have a different skill set. I have a growing clientele. And I just, was reassured that, hey, I'll be able to fall back on this because, the income that's coming from this side hustle of doing facials and skincare is actually pretty good. And so I was able to fully walk away from corporate because the business, the side hustle, was doing so well. So it was kind of both and it wasn't my initial plan, but it kind of came about because I was like, I have to figure out something given that my runway with my corporate job is coming to an end much sooner than I had initially anticipated. So it worked out.
Okay. So how do you even start?
Oh, that's a good question. So keep in mind, I'm still going through this myself, right? So even though I've been taking clients for about 9 months now, I just opened my skincare studio last month. So I've only been open in my physical space, my brick and mortar, for 3 weeks now. And so I would say the initial start back last year was just to share my skill set. And actually, that was really hard for me because I worked in HR for 10 years. I'm a behind the scenes type of girl. You don't need to see me. You don't need to know I'm here. Corinne was never here. Just pay me and let me go home. And so it really required me to just kind of like be a little upfront and open with the community, with people that I met that about my skill set and that I was taking clients. And then that clientele, the word of mouth started to grow. And once again, external forces kind of forced me to think about opening a brick and mortar because it was getting more and more difficult to maintain the clientele that I had working out of my apartment. So in my apartment building at Dilly, as you know, because you've come to get a service from me, there's space here. We have a lot of amenities. We have like things like a massage room, and I would just reserve that massage room and turn it into my spa for the hour or so that I had clients. And then I would break it back down, clean it up, and you would never know that I was there. So that became a lot more challenging to maintain because of my clientele was growing and then just policy changes within my building. So I was kind of forced to start looking at, okay, if you want to continue giving services to people, if you want to give good quality services to people, you're going to have to think about where else you can do this. And so I would say like November, December of last year, I started thinking about, okay, what would it look like for me to have a brick and mortar business? And I gave myself, I'm really good with deadlines. So I was like, if you don't have something by March 31st, then we'll just squash it. I found my apartment, my studio at the end of January. So just like by me, like putting it out there to other people, to the universe, things just kind of start happening. And so I would say to answer your question, the first thing would be to just set an intention. I knew that things were getting a little bit more challenging, and I knew that I needed to find a quick solution. And I was like, okay, well, I need a space. So God, help me figure out the space. And I started looking. I came back from the holiday in December and started, walking around, calling, going online, and people were responding. So things just kind of just started moving and happening for me. And I know that's not a tangible, I should say tangible. I know that's a hard to replicate type of response, but that's essentially what I did. I just said, I want to have my own space. I started looking for my own space. And by a month later, I had my own space, like the lease signed, the money handed over, and everything.
Okay. Well, I think that is good to hear because there are so many folks who are like, when you're trying to make big moves, you need to move in silence, and not say anything. And we forget that in doing that, sometimes you hide your intentions from the universe. So you do actually probably should say something.
Yeah.
Now, what about because this is probably what people want to know, like taxes and permits and all of that kind of like businessy stuff.
Yeah.
How does that work in Mexico?
One thing I will say that has been really helpful for me is that I do have kind of like a guide, a business coach, if you will. Adele, you know her because I learned about her through you, which is funny because I don't think you two have actually met.
No,
but I'll just say her name, the wonderful Professor Patricia Talley. She hosted a workshop about 2 years ago, which is basically all about how to do business in Mexico. And so that workshop was about 6 weeks. It was really helpful. And so I kind of had a little bit of a baseline of understanding, but still it was 2 years before that. Things were a little shaky in terms of my memory, but she's remained a constant support and resource for me. So anytime I have a question or anything like that, she's been kind of my go-to, because doing this completely by myself, I would have no clue. There's so much that is similar about doing business in Mexico to the US, but also there's a lot of difference. I would say, to answer your question more directly, like things in terms of taxes, your taxes here have to be filed on a monthly basis. So I don't know Spanish. I don't know Mexican tax law. So that meant that I had to get an accountant. And so through word of mouth, through referrals, I was able to find an accountant. And so that individual handles all of my reporting for me on a monthly basis. And basically what that essentially looks like is I report to her how much I made and what I spent. And depending on what I spent, I'm able to basically get tax write-offs. So that's why I say it's kind of similar to the US. So like you can minimize how much taxes you pay depending on what you're able to write off. So you can write off things like your rent, your spa equipment, supplies, anything and everything under their tax code that can be written off. My accountant does for me. So that's the taxes piece. In terms of, licensing and just opening up a business, that does require that you have the appropriate visa. So that's something that I also had to do. I had to change right after I had renewed my visa, paid so much money to do that, by the way, renewed my visa, had to turn around and do it again. So I've been to the INM office more times than I care to this year. But essentially, after renewing my temporary residency visa, I then had to change it to be able to do what they call lucrative activities, which is basically a form of a work permit. And so with that, I'm able to legally operate a business here in Mexico, and I don't necessarily have to worry about whether or not I'm legally able to, because it's now permitted via my visa. So that is something that I had to also speak to an attorney about and just make sure I was going about it in the right way, because it was a little bit more complicated. And to be quite honest with you, I was in the thick of opening my studio and I didn't want to be bothered. So I paid someone to handle that for me.
I think that's important to mention that I think bootstrapping and figuring it all out on your own is one thing when you're in the country you lived in a country where you are a native speaker of the language. But when you open a business elsewhere, I think that it's important to have that be part of, like, as you're figuring out, like, how much is it going to cost me to open this up, to assume that you're going to need to pay for assistance. You're going to need to pay for professional services.
Right.
I think Mexicans would agree with you that having an accountant, like, they speak the language. And
Right.
even for them, I think having an accountant here makes the tax situation tenable, because I have no interest in having to deal with that like that. But I understand if you run a business here, like that's how they do things, and you got to go with that. Okay, so we covered taxes. I'm glad you mentioned the visa situation, because I often see people asking questions, or I see people engaging in business on a tourist visa, and I'm like, okay, that's how you get yourself deported and and banned from a country. You were here on a temporary residence visa, which does not come with permission to work or engage in lucrative activity if you just qualify on financial solvency. That is a separate process, a separate visa. Okay, so you're legally able to engage in lucrative business here. You are paying your taxes. You had people in your circle, in your network, sought people out who could give you advice or at least point you in the right direction. Okay, so what is it like owning a brick and mortar business in your new country? I don't want to keep harping on, like, girl, you don't speak Spanish.
That's
but,
okay. I don't.
But doing this in a country where you don't really speak the language, because is your clientele mostly locals, foreigners, a mix?
Yeah. So answering your last question, my clientele is about 80-20. So 80% foreigners, 20% Mexican. And that's because of, the building that I live in is international. So the apartment building that I live in, I cater specifically to expats, but there are Mexicans more well off, I guess, Mexicans that live here in the building. And so I've acquired them as clients. And I would say, to kind of address the Spanish piece, I will say that it has definitely upped my Spanish game, of course, because I think so the thing about language acquisition, especially as an adult, is that you really have to be put in, at least for me, you have to be put in situations in where you are required to do nothing else but speak that particular language. And I've been here a year, and I can't think of any other experiences while I've been here that have forced me to really hone in and dig my heels into Spanish, like opening up a brick and mortar business. and I say that because, again, just like my apartment building, when I think back on that, and I signed that lease, everybody was speaking to me in English. My visa situation, I usually have a facilitator or someone helping me with that. I opened a bank account. Again, there was someone there that could speak English, but sitting down and having to sign a lease and talk to an attorney, with the landlord, and who doesn't know any English. Literally, she had like her teen daughter was like, "What's this word?" Um, with the attorney, right? So like this poor little 15-year-old is sitting here trying to translate amongst these adults.
Oh, goodness.
And trying to work with like the painters, the people building the furniture, the people delivering the furniture, who know nothing other than Spanish. It was really tested me and really forced me to lean in on my Spanish skills, as limited as they are. So yes, I was busting out the Google Translate. Yes, I was gesticulating quite a bit. Yes, there are some times at the height of my stress, I just had to call up a friend and be like, "Can you just please talk to them?" Because I have no clue what is being said to me. So it was definitely a challenge, but I needed that because I hadn't, language-wise, I hadn't had that being here in Mexico thus far. Because so far, to be quite honest, I've been accommodated in most situations in terms of the language piece. So it was challenging. When I think about it, I don't want to think too hard about it. I probably missed out on some coins because of my limited Spanish, things I could have taken care of more quickly, more easily, had I known what was taking place and if my Spanish was better. There were situations where I felt like I could have advocated for myself a little bit better, had I known if my Spanish was better, had I known what was going on. So like, for an example, I know you talked a lot about this on your channel. It's just like something as simple as delivery. Right. Delivery of goods, delivery of services. So just like getting the internet set up in my place. There was one company that like was like, "Oh yeah, they set up an appointment with me. We'll come install, put this money down. Come the day they're supposed to come install, they don't show up." And then they're like, "Oh, we don't have service in your area. Sorry." And I was like, "No. You've taken my money at this point." And I sat around and waited for you. You didn't show up. You could have told me beforehand that you didn't have service available in my area before you set up an appointment with me and took my money. That's so hard to say in a language where you're not a native speaker, right? Yeah. So, I'm relying on PayPal to go chase after them to get my money back. So just little things like that. Like, I could have avoided that if I had known the Spanish a little bit better and knew what to expect. So it was a challenge, but I got through it. I mean, I have my space. It's decorated. It has all that I need. I have a really
lovely. It's gorgeous.
Thank you. I have a good relationship with my landlord. So it all worked out, but it was definitely a challenge.
Okay. So what is your life like now? Because like you mentioned previously, you were seeing clients in a different part of the building that you live in. And now you have a dedicated physical space, commercial space to see clients. What is your life like now? Work-life balance? I don't know. Does that exist when you are an entrepreneur?
I'm trying to make it exist for me. I'm trying to be intentional about that because, like I said before, I was getting burnt out with HR and working in corporate. And so I'm taking some lessons and some reminders from that experience of being in corporate America in HR for 10 years and making sure and trying to be intentional about not replicating some of that now in my entrepreneurial life. It's a little harder because now it's solely on me to bring in income. But there's some things that I'm trying to instill that will help with that. So I'm trying to be very intentional about my schedule. So right now, I only take clients Thursday through Sundays, allowing those other 3 days off for me to rest, to take care of myself, to do things that I need to do in my own personal life. And then, of course, admin for the business. But I would say like still my mind 24/7, I'm constantly thinking about the business because now the main difference is that I have overhead. So whereas before, it was just me and whatever I have available, but now it's like, no, you have a second rent that you have to pay and you need to bring in more clients. So I've been sharing with people that like, I feel like my current clientele, my community has helped to get me to this point. So I'm able to meet rent, but now my focus is of course getting more clients so that I can not only pay rent, but also save money, pay myself, and also maybe in the near future, hire help because a lot of it is on me and I'm doing all the things. So there's constant, like even this morning, I woke up in my mind, I was like, I should post this to Instagram. And I was like, who who does it? That wasn't me a couple of weeks ago. It was like, oh, I should have breakfast, and well, what do I want on my eggs? Now it's like, no, you should post this. So just like, I would say, just as an entrepreneur, your mind is, at the very least, despite my schedule, my mind is always thinking about the business and thinking about ways I can bring in more money, more revenue. And also just kind of making sure that I still hold on to some key values that I have. For example, it's really important for me to not just sell. Like I don't want to just be, after people's coin. I want to facilitate and foster some form of community around this. So just thinking about how to be creative in that, but also understanding that you have overhead, you have costs now. So everything can't be rainbows and roses and fluffy and free. You still have to generate an income now. So that is also like my dual brain is like have community, but also like make money. So that's kind of like, I would say the biggest difference for me now is just like, my mind is constantly thinking about the business, how to grow it, how to make it successful, how to take care of all of the new expenses that have come about.
Okay. How has okay. In the building where your business is located, there are other businesses.
Mm-hmm.
What's the reception been like that you've received? Because a lot of people ask me because they see stuff on the news about like anti-immigrant, anti-foreigner sentiment here in Mexico, particularly in Mexico City.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would imagine folks in my audience would be curious, like how you've been received by like other businesses in your building, your experience doing all of this as a Black woman.
Yeah. Ooh, that's a really good question. So in my building, the reception has been positive. Everyone, generally speaking, Mexicans are very friendly people, very friendly culture. In my building, there's an attorney's office. They have like almost the whole of the first floor. And then my immediate neighbor, she is a jewelry maker. And I believe she's from Peru. So she's also a foreigner herself. And she's really sweet. She's been really helpful for me. When we met, we exchanged numbers. We were like, girl, I got you. I'll look after your place. You look after mine, water my plants while I'm not here. So like immediately we built some form of camaraderie and rapport with each other. In terms of the rest of the neighborhood, I haven't been so good about introducing myself, but that is something that I want to do in the next couple of weeks. Just kind of go around, introduce myself, let people know that I'm there. My experience has been overwhelmingly positive here in Mexico as a foreigner. But I have noticed that there is a shift taking place, mostly from the stories that I'm hearing of other people, not just other Black expats, but other foreigners. And so people are noticing just in the brief amount of time that they've been here that there's more English being spoken to them. They're noticing things like menus changing to cater to like a foreigner palate at restaurants. So like in my immediate community here in my apartment building, there is that kind of talk of like things are changing. And we recognize that like as foreigners, we kind of play a part in that. As a Black woman, I will say that there were times in this process of opening the brick and mortar, I was like, am I getting this treatment because I'm Black? It's because I'm a woman. And the beauty of it is that, nope, everybody that's a foreigner gets a sandwich. And so, yeah, like for example, the woman that I had a designer that helped me with some aspects of the space. And she was recounting to me some frustrations that she was having with the people that make the furniture that she designed. And I was like, oh, that sounds a lot like how I'm treated. She's like, yeah, they do it to everybody. And so having those conversations with other Mexicans has helped me to be like, okay, this is just a part of Mexican culture. And yes, there are things like the foreigner tax. There are things like, hey, since you don't speak as good at Spanish, I might take a little bit of advantage. But for the most part, things like customer service is pretty universal, right? Like, everybody gets the same treatment. Everybody kind of gets the, services and products not being the way you expected. So another example is I ended up having a custom massage bed made. Great customer service before I paid, right? The minute I paid, the customer service went downhill. So these folks, they were like, okay, we'll deliver the bed in 2 to 3 days. And I was like, okay, well, this doesn't really give me much time to plan, but I'll call you in two to 3 days. They show up the next day, Adelia, talking about we're outside. And I was like, wait a second.
What?
I thought it was going to take you 2 to 3 days to make the bed. Here you are at my front door. Mind you, I'm not there. They're like, we're here, come get it. And I was like, I'm not there. So what we ended up doing was I with my broken Spanish, was like, can you come back on Monday at 3:00? Yes, ma'am. We can come Monday at 3. Monday at 3? Yes. Monday at 3. Lunes a 3.
And I know when you asked that, you were like, this is a gamble.
Mm-hmm.
I may never see these people again.
Exactly. But here's the thing. The next morning, 10 a.m. Hi, ma'am, we're outside. I was like, it's not Monday. It's not Monday at 3. What do you mean? They're like, well, we here with your stuff. So if you don't, in Spanish, what do you want us to do? We're driving around the city with your stuff. Come get it. And I was like, okay, give me an hour, right? And so I'm like rushing, getting dressed, running out the door. 15 minutes had passed. They're calling me again. Where are you? I said, give me an hour. I'll be there in an hour. And so just that, in my mind, and initially I was like, it's because I'm a foreigner. They could tell my Spanish is not good. But in speaking with other people, they're like, no, that's par for the course. That's how it is here.
Yeah, sounds about right. Now, you did mention about maybe receiving different treatment because you are a woman. I was just reading something about the upcoming election, like it's very possible, very likely Mexico's going to have a female president, first in its history. And they were talking about how the way the candidates are having to position themselves. The two female candidates are having to do things that the male candidate didn't because they are women, and because this is a country that is known for, machismo and all of that. Have you run into any of that? Particularly, I'm thinking doing business.
I'm going to say no, not to the point where I feel like it was. So this is that duality, right, of being a Black woman. It's like, is it because I'm Black, or is it because I'm a woman, or is it both, right? So I haven't been able to fully tease out it's because I'm a woman part. So for an example, the building I'm in is going through some renovations. And so there's a SWAT team of builders, carpenters, electricians, painters. And at first, when I first got into the building, I noticed that the energy that they had, while friendly, they weren't so quick to do the things that I would ask them to. And so in that moment, I was like, okay, is it because of my Spanish? Is it because I'm a foreigner? Because I'm, but I noticed that my landlord, who's a woman, she would come in and the room would shift, right? Like these folks would get up and start doing if I had asked them to install a new lock for me, I asked them to do that. It didn't happen. Bless you. So I messaged her and I was like, hey, can you have the guys install? Immediately the next day they were in my face. Okay, when do you need it? Right? So I do. I'm not really sure what to make of that, other than, her Spanish is better. She's the one paying them, right? So she's the boss. So she has that leeway. But I did, in that moment, I was kind of like, why are you not? I know you understand me. Why are you not doing what I'm asking you to do? So there's moments where you really can't, I haven't really been able to ascertain and be able to tease out, why is it that I'm getting a less than ideal treatment or experience with you? Is it because of all these things that I come with, or is it just because that's just the culture? And overwhelmingly, I'm kind of landing at this is kind of just the culture, because I've talked to so many people where they're like, yeah, that's kind of how it is. Other Mexicans acknowledge that this is a problem and they don't like it, but that's just kind of how the culture is. So I don't know.
But I think, well, I'm glad you recounted that, because I think it's important to realize that you've got to, this is particularly being Black Americans, because in the US, more times out of not, poor treatment, mistreatment you receive, it is because you are Black.
Right.
And you go through a lifetime of living that reality, it is very easy to go somewhere else and
Hmm.
transfer that same reaction, like, oh, this is what it is.
Right.
And it's something we have to be particularly careful about when we
Yes.
travel other places, when we move other places, that like, no, they just mess over everybody. We
Right.
have to be particularly careful before we assign a reason to something.
Yes. Hmm. Yeah, I would
And
agree
like
with
I
that.
said, that's something particularly unique to us.
Yes.
And I'm not saying like, oh, you shouldn't have even thought that. Well, no, because our
Right.
reality for
Hmm.
our entire lives growing up in the United States, that's what it was.
Exactly.
Um,
Hmm.
are there things, I know you're still very new
Hmm.
in this journey, but are there things you can look back at now and think, I should have done that differently, or I wish I could have done that differently?
I would say the biggest thing, Adele, you kind of heard a little bit of the story during the grand opening. I think so. My grand opening was delayed um, because of the people that I was working with. So if I could go back, I would factor in more of that, more time to factor in the delays. So um, a big part of the culture here is that people will say, there's, maybe you can help me tease this out because I've been struggling with a way to articulate this in a way that's respectful, but also like kind of speaks to the frustration of it, right? So there's, with Mexican culture, there is this sense, there's people are, as I said before, Mexican people are very nice. And generally speaking, there is, when it comes to service type of interaction, so whether you're at a restaurant, whether you're paying to have something done, where you're exchanging goods, there is initially this sense of like, I want to help you, I want to meet you halfway. In my experience in this process, I noticed that the minute money got exchanged, that niceness, that being catered to, being supported, kind of went away. And this is with everyone from the local flower man on the corner, all the way to your major corporations that do things like internet and phone service. So, and I say that because with that, I didn't necessarily know, I wasn't anticipating that type of shift. And so because of that, I had to deal with a lot of delays because I was constantly chasing down and following up with people who promised me one thing and didn't deliver, or gave me a deadline and missed the deadline. There was so much of that that I had not anticipated. Things like getting my materials and cards designed and printed. I still don't, I've been open for 3 weeks. I still don't have, business cards. I finally went yesterday and I was like, let me just go and do this myself. Right. So there was a lot of that in this process that I had no clue of knowing, because not only had that not been my experience thus far, but two, like, how do you know that? How are you supposed to know that, you know, the time that you're given, the deadline that you're given, is not really the real time. You might want to tack on a week or two or three from the time that you were given. So,
I would have expected that in like a friend of mine owns some property and she's like building a house from scratch. I've done that once and I'll never do it again.
mhm.
Because I'm convinced that people who go into like the trades, they are not, their strong suit is not like
It's the trade.
deadlines.
It's the trade that they're doing. Yeah.
It's the trade. It's the rest of that stuff. No. So, one of the things I kept saying with her, because she was like, oh, this is delayed. And I was like, that's just a given. So in that part, I would never believe the first date that somebody gave me. And we've talked about how frustrating it is, like when your bed was delivered, like they told you 2 days, but then they show up the next day. So like it's like you have to be ready all
Mhm.
the time. Now, more like in professional services, I am surprised to hear that. But then again, I am also not surprised. And I
Mhm.
guess, I guess that is just a Mexico thing.
Yeah.
And you just are like, that's what they said. But who knows?
Yeah.
I find myself saying who knows
Yeah.
uh, a lot.
Mhm.
And I will say that witnessing Mexicans be in your position and like I've noticed how people get like fired up when somebody doesn't do anything. And I'm
Mhm.
like, oh, is that how you get
Yes.
the
Mhm.
results you need? You need to be like in somebody's face or like
Yes.
causing a scene, which is not where I
Right.
veer. And definitely, I don't have the
Yes.
Spanish to cause a
Mhm.
scene.
Mhm.
So I do wonder if that's just it. So yeah, I
Yeah.
can feel you on the delays.
And that's what I was told. Like, I had several friends that were like, "You need to go up there and go off on them." I'm like, first of all, I don't even do that in my home country, in my home language. That's just not how I operate, right? Like, I'm non-confrontational. If anything, I'm just going to leave you a bad review and never see you again.
Yeah.
But at that point, it had caused such delays that I was like desperate and kind of had to depend on these people, right? So, but yeah, to your point, like I don't have the Spanish to do that. But I was told many times that you either one need to go off on them really strongly, or two, you need to beg. And I'm also too proud to beg. So neither one of those are good options for me because I'm not begging you for anything. I'm not begging you to take my money. I refuse. No matter what culture, what language this is. I refuse to beg for you to take my money. I would just go, elsewhere. So yeah, I would say, again, that was just the biggest thing. Like, I wish I had known that would be, I had built in that time for like these types of delays for people not, doing what they said they were going to do when they were going to do it.
And I really thought you were going to mention the tendency in Mexico for people to say yes when they
Oh yeah.
know they absolutely cannot do what you have asked them to. You have
Yes.
invited them to something. They
Mhm.
know they can't come and then will sit in your face and be like, yes, Saturday at 3.
So yes. But it didn't happen quite that way. I have more of that. You remember the time we were finishing up the walk, and we went to that restaurant, and someone had asked for like a fruit bowl with strawberries.
Yes.
And they were like, "Yes, we have strawberries." And they proceed to bring out a bowl of frozen rock hard strawberries. And it's like, come on now.
Yep.
Yeah, so I guess that does relate. Like, I wasn't flat out told yes. It was more like, yes, we can do it on this particular. I was more so focused on the deadline. So like everything that was promised was met. However, the deadline and when I was told that it could be done was not met. So it wasn't I was told yes and it didn't happen, or I got something different. It was more like the delayed part. But yeah, that totally relates and is consistent.
Okay, as a Black woman who has been living here for a few years, we have been saying to other Black women who offer particularly beauty services, like, y'all should come. There are those of us here who would love to be your clients.
Mm-hmm.
Have you found that to be true? Has that borne out for you?
Oh yes, the majority of my clients are Black women, Black women expat. And it's not to say that those services don't exist here in Mexico. I mean, the market is saturated with beauty skincare services, but in my research, the main things that I've noticed that are missing is, of course, specific care for Black skin, darker skin, and then also our sanitation standards are different here than what we might be used to in places like the US or the UK or wherever else. So I've had many of clients that have come to me with horror stories because they went and tried a service here in Mexico, or they tried a service but it didn't quite meet their expectations. Either things aren't lasting as long, you get your nails done, your gel manicure is chipping within a few days, your lashes are, you paid for lash extensions, they're falling out in a couple of days. So there is definitely that need, not only for our care for our skin, but also just like the quality that we're used to is a little bit more challenging to find here. So I feel like yes, the market is saturated from, the standpoint of beauty services, but there is still room for folks to come here and really, carve out a space for themselves to do things in a standard, in a way that we're accustomed to. So for example, I'm trying to, tell a friend, I was like, listen, girl, everybody's telling me they want lashes. I hate doing lashes. I will never do lash services. But if you want to, there's definitely a market here because folks, want their lashes done. but have to go all the way to like the far corners of the city to find a girl that does it at a price that they like, that at a quality that they're used to. So, I feel like if that's something that folks are interested in, they definitely have an opportunity here to dip their foot into.
Okay, we haven't talked about like what it is that you do at Skin by Corinne. We talked about like how you ended up here and, getting the business started, but we haven't actually talked about what you do.
Yeah. So I
So
do
tell us about that.
skincare services. I specialize in facials. My technique is what I call the no downtime technique of chemical peels, for example. So my approach is all about helping to renew and rejuvenate the skin, especially for darker skin folks. A lot of my services are focused around just brightening the skin, creating a more even tone, which is challenges that we're often faced with. And then I also do sugaring, which is a form of hair removal that you use sugar wax paste. I do that because it's more gentle on our skin and it's less likely to cause any type of abrasion or harm to our skin. So those are the two main services that I offer. I have a suite of different styles of facials and things like that I offer, but those are the two main things that I do right now. Now that I'm in my brick and mortar, I am definitely eyeing expanding those services to things that I've been hearing from the community that they want to see done. So that's something that, within the next couple of months, I want to start thinking a little bit more intently about and bringing into the space.
Is there anything, or what would you say, somebody who's watching this video and they are contemplating an international move, because, okay, I just realized I'm gonna have to work through some stuff before we get to the actual question.
Okay.
So many of the people who comment on my videos or email me, are very caught up in the idea of, I need a remote job. I got to find me a job and take that job with me. And maybe a week ago, 2 weeks ago, I interviewed Kima from Costa Rica. And we talked about like she does like 5, 6 different things. And one of the things I've been trying to get people to do is to kind of shift their thinking a little bit, because it doesn't have to be one job.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be a job. If you think about the most successful immigrants in the United States, they tend to be entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm.
So, there are multiple ways to be able to support yourself with a move abroad, be it a remote job, be it a job in the destination country, or literally creating your own job by creating your own business. So if somebody is watching this and now you've said some things, got some wheels turning for them, and they're thinking about uh, being an entrepreneur and doing it in another country, or particularly Mexico. What advice would you give them?
Hmm. I have to chuckle a little bit because that was me. Like when I started watching your videos years ago, I was thinking in that same line of, I have to find a remote job. I have to be able to take this corporate job with me, even though I was grossly unhappy in it and I was ready to move on. I was like, but it has to come with me some way. Um, I forget how I exactly came to this conclusion, but I think my hangup was that I was worried that I didn't have another skill set to fall on. And all I knew was HR. I'd done HR, like I said, for 10 plus years. So I was like, if I can't find a remote job, if I can't take this corporate job with me, what else do I do? And in that moment, I was like, I don't have anything. I don't have any other skill. I mean, so the argument to
Which
me,
is foolish,
right?
but
The argument could be made that like those are transferable skills are in there, right? But as I was having this like conversation within myself, I was like, I don't know anything else. And at the same time, I was also just kind of starting to play around with the idea of going back to school. Mind you, I have all the degrees that I'm not using, and I was not happy where I was not satisfied with that decision. I was like, I need another skill set and I have to go back to school. I was not happy. But I was like, I wanted to become an esthetician. So it required that I go back to school. So for my line of thinking, I'm very type A. I'm very much like, I need to have a plan. I need to have a backup to the backup to the backup to the backup of the plan. What are my backups? And so I was like, well, if I'm feeling like I don't have another skill set, let me go and create and develop another skill set for myself that I could fall back on. One that is space independent, country independent. I could take it with me no matter where I go. And it just so happened that, my love of skincare kind of coalesced with this realization at the same time. And it just made sense for me to go back to school and, become an esthetician. So I don't know if that necessarily helps address what you were calling out, Adelia, in terms of feeling like you have to have all these things before you leave the country. But it gave me some reassurance of like, okay, if I can't do HR anymore, I do have a very tangible skill set that I can fall back on. And my type A brain needed that at the time.
I think so, because really that's the thing that I've been trying to get people to realize is we need to think about, well, what are the skills? What are the things I can do? Mm-hmm. Because I find that people get very caught up in, this is what my degree is. This is the job title I have been doing. And if I can't find exactly that,
right,
then there is no option for me. And it's not so much. It's about what can you do? And maybe the things you can do are unrelated to each other. And that means you're going to do several unrelated things. Or maybe the skills that you have, once you like list them out on paper, because I'm very big on that, like physically doing it. And once you look at it, you're like, oh, there's this other thing that uses those same skills. Maybe it's something that like I don't have experience with, but yeah, you do. Like you might not have ever held that job title. You may have never run that kind of business, but yet you've got the skills. So your answer is perfect. It's really about understanding what are your skills and what can you do with them.
Yeah. I really wanted to, as I was exploring that, I was like, okay, I have a skill set that's very cerebral. And I was like, let me get a skill set that's more tangible, like more hands-on. And so that's kind of also what led me to the esthetician part of like, I actually touch and hold things and have skill set with my hands. And it's not just another cerebral, hope I don't lose it type of skill set. So I just wanted to diversify what I felt like I was able to do. That makes sense.
I think I would argue, like, now you already said you were low-key burned out on doing HR, but you had some skills. Let's be clear, y'all. She may not have thought she did, but she did. Okay.
Well, like this was Corinne like a couple of years ago. This is Corinne like fully burnt out, shut in during, the pandemic, feeling stuck in a scarcity mindset, having a really hard time thinking about what was possible in her life. And so just that little bit, that little nugget of like, I don't have skills. I don't know anything else other than HR. This seems so silly now, but it was such a blocker back then for me to break through. And so that realization that I can get other skills was such a game changer. It seems so simple and silly now, but at the time I was really struggling with that.
Okay. Well, I'm glad. Thank you for sharing that, because I think there's somebody watching this that needed to hear that and needed to hear it from you. One thing we have not talked about is, particularly because I'm actually working on a video about the super peso. So you came a while back. I'm sure the exchange rate was much better for the US dollar versus what it is, let's say today, because the direction it's been going this last week has not been great. No. If you're somebody making money in dollars. Let's talk about that, because you're living here and you are now, because you no longer do your HR job, you're earning your money in pesos.
Yeah. So so there's two sides to this, right? So there's the savings and the money that I brought with me from the US to Mexico is still in USD. So I hold all that money is still sitting in a US account. I laugh because it's like, and there it shall stay for a while. So there's that piece. And so when I was calculating, was doing your calculation of like, how much do you need in order to make this happen for myself. I gave myself a runway of 2 years. So as I was working and saving to leave the US, I wanted to give myself a savings net of expenses of about 2 years. Quickly, I realized after getting here, I think last year, spring of last year is when we really started noticing the dip in the US dollar. I quickly realized, oh, that money might not get me to the 2 years like I had thought because I had not factored in the USD performance to the MXN. So while that has served me, the plan has worked to a certain degree. That money, I'm anticipating that money will not last as long as I had thought it would initially. The flip side of that is now with the business Skin by Corinne, I am earning in pesos. So all of my pricing, everything is in pesos. My expenses are in pesos. So I am seeing the benefits to that of like, I have a bank account. I have a personal and a business bank account, Mexican bank account. I am earning Mexican interest on those accounts. So there's that bonus, that side as well, right? So it's taking some getting used to, but I'm also seeing the benefits of, okay, I have everything on this side of my world is run by the peso, and I'm starting to see some benefits there. So like I said, the better interest rates, the high interest rates on my accounts, earning and paying, my earnings and my expenses are both in pesos. And so there's just less, what's the word? Clutter in my brain about like how much, what's the exchange rate? What's the exchange rate? It's all just like,
well, yeah, you're not losing on the exchange rate. Like I typically, for a long time I lived here, I never paid attention to fluctuations in the exchange rate. But like I would like, when I get the USD that needs to pay my rent, I would like it to stretch as far as possible. So I'm watching the exchange rate more often. But you mentioned like the Mexican interest. Aren't they paying like 9, 10, 11% interest? Like,
yes.
that part is nice.
Yeah.
And so, okay, you kind of got caught unawares with the decline in the strength of the dollar against the peso. Is there anything you're doing, because like it could continue to be like this, or it could kind of shift back to where it was previously? Are there things you're doing to anticipate that? Or you're just like, let me benefit from it while I can, and when I can't, it is what it is?
To be quite honest with you, not intentionally, Adelia. So like I said, like I was kind of joking before, like I still have my US accounts. Like I will say that's the biggest thing. I got rid of a lot of stuff before I left the US. I did not close any of my accounts, right? So like my credit cards, my 401, my Roth, all those accounts are still US based. But like I said, I also have Mexican bank accounts. So I have a personal checking and savings account, and then I also have an account for my business. So I'm just trying to wait it out just to see what's going to happen. But I feel like I'm in a good space because I've kind of diversified my cash holdings. And I feel like that's the little bit that I know about finance, is that diversity is good. And so I figured that's the best that I can do at this point, kind of given that I'm in a state of transition myself, right? So like I've no longer have, regular income from, a corporate job. I'm just opening up a new business. I'm, trying to grow this business. So I feel like I'm in this weird in-between state. But I will say that, the savings that I have in the US has helped me in my time here. I live very comfortably. I was able to, get my rental space for the studio, pay for it to be designed how I want to my specifications, paid rent and a deposit in cash, so I've been able to do all the things that I have personally needed fairly comfortably. But I am anticipating, like I said, that maybe I won't make it to the full 2 years that I gave myself. It might be like a year and 8 months, a year and 9 months before I see like my cash savings that I allotted for this start to dwindle and run out.
Thank you again for agreeing to come and talk to the people. I wish you all of the success.
Thank you.
I am a client, a customer. I will be
Yes.
seeing her in a matter of days. Just
Yes.
last night, I was at book club and somebody was like, "Oh, what are you doing this weekend?" I was like, "Well, I got a facial." And they were like, "Oh, where?" I was like, "Don't worry, I got you. Skin by Corinne. That's where you need to go." So we haven't told the people, if you are in Mexico City or you will be in Mexico City, you don't necessarily have to live here. Maybe
Right.
you're coming for the week, coming for the
Mhm.
weekend. If they want to book with you, how do they do that?
Yeah, so my website is www.skinbycorinne.com. And you can also contact me on my socials, everything, Instagram, Facebook, everything is at Skin by Corinne. And yeah, just reach out to me, let me know, and I can help walk you through what would be a good service for you to start with. There's a lot to choose from, I must admit. But again, my hours on my working days are Thursdays through Sundays. And so anytime during then I'm available. I would love to welcome folks to our new space. I'm based here in Colonia Juarez, which is not too far from, the hot spots like Roma Norte, Roma Sur. And yeah, I mean, it's been great. My clientele already has increased significantly, or my bookings have increased significantly. And so, not to create alarm, but I do tell people, like, get booked now because I can't guarantee that the time slot that you want will be available in the next week, because it feels like the week before I always kind of get booked up. So reach out to me if you have any questions, and I would love to welcome you to a space.
And I will add, reach out to her about skincare. Do not reach out to her about, "Hey, I want to start business in Mexico," because that's not what she does.
That's not my expertise.
Yeah, that's not her expertise. Talk to her about skincare. All
Yeah.
right. I hope you enjoy hearing from Corinne. If you are planning a move abroad or you're just thinking about the idea, be sure to download my free Move Abroad checklist. And if you need some additional assistance one-on-one time, I offer that as well. You can book that with me by going to pickygirltranstheworld.com /work with me.